Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
The government is open on this short holiday week, and it'll stay that way through at least the first couple months of the new year. That's thanks to a continuing resolution Congress passed and the president signed late last week. But the way Congress went about it is going to make things complicated and maybe harder to pass full appropriations bills for 2024. Mitchell Miller is the Capitol Hill correspondent for our sister station, WTOP, and he joins us now with the latest from the Hill. And Mitchell, lots to talk about, but let's actually start with the CR that just passed late last week, or that the president just signed late last week. This laddered approach is certainly unique, something we haven't quite seen before. Talk us through what the implications are and how it may complicate life down the road.
Yeah, this had a lot of people's attention when it was first introduced, and actually it came from a Maryland Congressman, Andy Harris, who's a member of the House Freedom Caucus. They were trying to find some way that they could balance the conservatives with the more moderate Republicans in the House and try to figure out some way, because a lot of conservatives do not like continuing resolutions, as you know. So they were trying to appease both groups. But bottom line for the federal agencies is that you've got this two-step process, hence the name laddered continuing resolution, where you have these appropriations that are going through January 19th and then another set through February 2nd. Now, critics will say this only creates more opportunity, if you will, for more shutdowns and potentially more issues. And if you look at the two tranches, you have military construction and Veterans Affairs, HUD, all being funded in that first January 19th group. And then the Defense Department gets more of its funding on February 2nd. Well, some people from the Pentagon have pointed out that this is really going to make things very difficult for them, because they're already trying to plan around these potential shutdowns. And Mike McCord with the Defense Department, the chief financial officer, last week, he stated that this just makes it more difficult for them to make any kind of long-range planning, because they're always having to worry about the possibility of a shutdown. And of course, as he points out, that affects morale, it affects planning. And what he would like to do, obviously, is see it more the basic back to regular order. Of course, that's what the House is trying to get to, but they just aren't getting there right now. And I think it's going to be really interesting when you have this, what I believe will be a major clash between the House and the Senate when we get into January and into February. There could be a very good chance, actually, of a shutdown, because they really did kick the can down the proverbial road this time.
And what would be the source of that tension? Is it just that there are unacceptable items in the House appropriations bills?
That's part of it, and also that the House really, in the view of Democrats, went back on the agreement on the debt ceiling, where former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and Democrats agreed on these certain levels. And then when McCarthy went back and eventually got kicked out by conservatives, they said, no, we don't want that level. We want to go deeper. So they are proposing a lot of much deeper cuts in these appropriations bills. And also, as you mentioned, some of these poison pills that are scattered around in some of these spending bills as well. So I think they are going to push really hard when we get to January, because they kind of gave the new House Speaker, Mike Johnson, this little honeymoon period and said, okay, we'll give you a mulligan here and you can do this CR right now. But when we get into January, we're going to really go hard on getting these spending cuts. And Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has made it very clear that Democrats are not going to go for any of that. So House Republicans are probably going to hit a stone wall with Democrats in the Senate when we get into the new year.
And I guess one of the oddities here is this whole CR process will have extended 2023 funding levels basically, not quite, but almost halfway into 2024. So if they want to achieve some set level of 2024 spending reductions, you would have to cut even deeper in that back half of the year in order to get where they want. Is that a right way to think about it?
Yeah, that's a really good way to think about it. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't want to think about it in that way, but that's really where we're heading. And of course, under that debt ceiling that I mentioned, even if they get close and almost pass all of these 12 appropriations bills, but they don't, and they don't hit the April 30th deadline, which is under the debt ceiling, to avoid sequestration, then they're going to hit a 1% across the board top line budget cut. And again, that's something that the Pentagon is really concerned about, as well as a lot of Republicans and Democrats, particularly in the Senate, who want to make sure that military funding continues to flow. That could really cause a lot of cuts across the board for defense spending in the coming year.
And while we have you, Mitchell, I wanted to make sure we talk a little bit about the decision on the FBI headquarters location in Greenbelt, Maryland, because I know you talked to both members of the Virginia Senate delegation about that this week. Is there still a chance that this may not be a done deal and then this saga will drag out further?
Well, that's certainly the hope of the Virginia delegation. They are really roaring mad about this decision. And we all knew that when the decision was made that each side, one side was, of course, going to proclaim victory, in this case, as they call themselves, Team Maryland, the Maryland delegation. And then on the other side, Virginia is just so upset about this. But more than just we thought we had a better sight type of back and forth. In this case, you have the Virginia delegation formally now requesting that the GSA's Inspector General do a full review of this. And they point to the comments that were made by FBI Director Christopher Wray in a letter to the GSA in which he said he had real problems with the fact that a 3-member panel of the GSA had recommended the Springfield, Virginia site and then was effectively overruled by a political appointee within GSA. And so Senators Kaine and Warner have made it clear they are going to push and push hard on this. I don't know that it'll necessarily get reversed, but it will certainly stretch out how long this is going to be discussed. And that, of course, is going to delay whether or not funding actually potentially comes for the actual relocation to Greenbelt, whether or not, the shovels are going to go into the ground. And then there's really an interesting twist related to this as well. House Republicans are actually upset with the FBI for totally unrelated reasons. They think that the FBI has gone too far in terms of surveillance and have a whole list of issues that they have with the FBI from a policy standpoint. And they have actually threatened to try to withdraw the money for the relocation because of those reasons. And what's interesting is last week, Virginia Congressman Jerry Connolly actually indicated if the Republicans go ahead and try to hold up the funding for Greenbelt, he would be open to the idea of supporting that. Now, Senators Kaine and Warner wouldn't go that far necessarily, but that just shows you to the extent the argument is still going on, even though this decision came after literally years being years in the making.
And speaking of the prospect of punishing agencies for decisions lawmakers don't like, it looks like there's a bit of movement on breaking the logjam over military nominations that's been in place for many months now by Senator Tuberville. What's happening there?
Yeah, this is finally really coming to a head, and it's only taken, 9 months? Since February, Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville has held these promotions up, and by the way, they have continued to rise. At one point, it was around 200 military promotions. We're now at the point where it's at more than 400 military promotions, and last week, after the continuing resolution was passed by the Senate, you would think that they would kind of wipe their hands of it and say, okay, we avoided a shutdown, we're going home. But Republican senators included are so mad at Tuberville that they actually stayed on the Senate floor and tried again, as they have in the past, to individually bring up names for promotions. And each time he objected. And this went literally into Thursday morning to like 2 a.m. as they tried to push him on this. And then, of course, the other big significant development, very significant, that could break this logjam is the fact that the Rules Committee basically said they were ready for a change in procedure to allow all of these promotions to be taken up en bloc. In other words, they could all be taken up at once, which has never been done before. And the Democrats, though, they do need to get 9 Republican votes to pass, to get over a filibuster. There are several Republicans right now who are so fed up with Tuberville's hold on all these promotions that they have indicated they may go along with Democrats, even though they really, really don't want to change procedure in the Senate, and it would only be temporary, but nonetheless, there's a lot of institutionalists that don't want it changed. But I do think that this is going to come to a head in the coming weeks, because actually, if we get to the end of the year and to the start of the year, everything gets wiped out and they would have to start from scratch. So that is really why that, once again, it's the calendar that's putting the pressure on the lawmakers. They've allowed this to go on for so many months this year, but if they have to literally start over, and then plus, let's not forget that we have a war raging on in the Middle East. We have the situation in Ukraine, as many of the people have pointed out, and just the